In the headlines, Korea's industrial output grows at the slowest pace since the year 2000 due to the effects of the 2014 April ferry disaster and strikes in the auto industry. South Korea and the United States are set to hold back-to-back senior-level talks this week. How to deal with future cyber attacks from North Korea rises as one of the key issues on the table. And bombings in North Sinai kill at least 27 people, and the Islamic State's Egypt branch claims responsibility for the attack. Welcome to the program. You're watching Primetime News. Coming to you live from Seoul, I am Kang Cheri.
And I'm Sean Lim. Hope you had a great week. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We begin with the latest figures that point to a still sluggish recovery for the Korean economy.
That's right. Industrial output rose at its slowest pace ever last year, while business environment and sentiment, that is, for manufacturers here in Korea also remains sluggish. Our Hwang Jie shows us what's dragging on growth.
Korea posted the worst output growth last year. Statistics Korea says the country's output across all industries went up a mere 1.1% in 2014 from a year earlier. That marks the slowest pace of growth since the year 2000 when the agency started to compile related data. The agency attributed the sluggish growth to an overall downturn last year as the economy was hit hard by the Seoul ferry disaster and partial strikes in the auto industry. By sector, output in mining and manufacturing remained unchanged from the previous year, while service sector output rose 2.2%. Facility investment, however, jumped more than 4.5% on the back of strong investments in auto and machinery sectors. December's industrial output also rose almost 1% from a month ago after auto workers ended their strikes and factories normalized operations. Still, experts say it's hard to interpret last month's uptick as a recovery sign, as the improvement is largely because of a low base caused by the strikes. Such gloomy economic data is directly reflected in how businesses are seeing the economic conditions. The Bank of Korea says its manufacturers' business sentiment index for this month came in at 73, unchanged from a month earlier. A reading under 100 means pessimists outnumber optimists. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Korea's central bank has hinted that it's not going to cut interest rates anytime soon, although the country's inflation rate is expected to stay well below the target band. And as our Kim Min-ji tells us, in the face of ballooning household debt, the central bank says a key rate cut could do more harm than good.
The Bank of Korea says it will not cut interest rates simply because the nation is expected to have low inflation. In its semi-annual report, the central bank made clear that it will take into account growing household debt and other negative side effects before implementing any expansionary monetary policies. The country's inflation rate is expected to fall below the bank's target band of 2.5 to 3.5% this year, but the report suggests it doesn't justify a rate cut. That's because a slump in crude and agricultural prices, not a drop in demand, were the main culprits that lowered consumer prices to 1.2% in the second half of last year. The bank also brushed aside concerns that low inflation may herald a long period of economic stagnation for the country, saying a rate cut could pose a threat to financial stability. With the country's runaway household debt hitting around $920 billion, economists warn that a further rise in the debt level could sap consumers of their spending power. The central bank's base rate is already hovering at 2%, a level not seen since the height of the global financial crisis. It cut its base rate twice in the second half of last year, in line with the government's efforts to boost the weak domestic economy. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
China was the #1 target for foreign direct investment last year, topping the U.S. for the first time in more than a decade. Kwon So-hwa reports on how the country's steady growth was the main reason, along with the increasing flow of funds to developing countries.
China became the top destination for foreign direct investment last year, according to the latest report by the UN Conference on Trade and Development. This is the first time it's topped the United States since 2003. Foreign businesses invested over $127 billion into China last year, a $3 billion rise from the previous year. The U.S., on the other hand, saw investments plunge to $86 billion from over $230 in 2013. That put the U.S. in third behind China and Hong Kong, followed by Singapore, Brazil, and the U.K. The U.S. was the only developed country in the top 5. The UN Conference's Director of Investment and Enterprise, James Zahn, says China's performance is attributed to its steady economic growth. He added there have been changes in the investment areas from manufacturing toward the service sector and from labor-intensive fields to tech-intensive ones. And investors are generally shifting away from developed economies to developing ones, with foreign direct investment in developing economies having doubled since the 2008 global financial crisis. Asia alone has accounted for 15% of the inflow last year, the highest amount ever. Although Korea's FDI inflow has been among the bottom 7 out of 8 Asian countries for 6 years, Korea ranked 4th out of 177 countries for foreign direct investment potential in a separate UNCTAD report. Also, the FDI amount pledged to Korea last year reached a record high of $19 billion due to recently signed free trade agreements. Kwon So-hwa, Arirang News.
Duty-free shops at Korea's Incheon International Airport have been booming thanks to Chinese tourists spending big bucks. And now domestic companies are hoping to use their experience with foreign travelers to expand business overseas. Our Kim Ji-yeon tells us more.
Businesses are in a bidding war to open a duty-free shop at Incheon International Airport. The 14 bidders this year include conglomerates such as Lotte, Silla, and Shinsegae, and smaller licensees like Donghwa. Duty-free shops have seen their sales jump by an average of 10% a year over the past 5 years. The sales volume of the duty-free shops at the Incheon International Airport was among the largest worldwide. The shops at Incheon seem to have a bright future, largely thanks to the increase in the number of Chinese tourists visiting the country, as their spending comprises 35% of total sales at the shops. The airport was named the world's best duty-free shops in a business traveler survey of Chinese tourists in 2014. But the appeal of opening a shop at Incheon cannot be expressed in numbers only. Companies are using the know-how they've gained at the airport to expand their business overseas. For example, Lotte reported sales of $3.8 billion last year at duty-free shops in airports and cities around the world, including Japan's Kansai Airport and Guam Airport. That's a 6-fold increase from 2000. The Incheon International Airport Corporation says it will finalize which businesses win this year's round of bidding by February 18th. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Your gateway to the day's biggest stories in Korea and around the world. Breaking news, the hottest interviews, and a whole lot more. Join Arirang Sean Lim and Kang Che-ri from the heart of Seoul.
News begins now.
Primetime news, weeknights, live at 10 on Arirang TV.
South Korea and the United States are holding back-to-back senior-level talks this week. A senior U.S. delegation was in Seoul for disarmament talks, and dealing with future cyber attacks from North Korea was one of the key issues on the table. Our Hwang Sung-hee tells us more.
U.S. Undersecretary of State Rose Gottemoeller says North Korea's cyber attack on Sony Pictures last year has brought Seoul and Washington even closer together, extending their strong alliance to the area of cybersecurity.
There was no daylight between the Republic of Korea and the United States in how we dealt with this issue, and both of our presidents, President Park and President Obama, feel that this is an enormously important area where we must be joined very closely together in how we address cyber threats.
The U.S. diplomat was in Seoul Friday for discussions on disarmament and nuclear non-proliferation issues. When asked whether President Barack Obama's comment about the collapse of North Korea was part of U.S. retaliation against future cyber attacks, she said the new executive order reflects the president's commitment. President Obama said in a recent YouTube interview that the spread of information via the internet will eventually lead the North Korean regime to collapse.
I think the fact that we have a new executive order that's devoted to this, it really shows how committed the president is to paying intense attention when these problems arise.
South Korea and the U.S. are planning to hold a round of annual cybersecurity talks in Washington in the coming months, which will be their first such meeting since last February. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Top U.S. official in North Korea, Sung Kim, says the U.S. is always open for talks with North Korea when it comes to denuclearization. Speaking to reporters in Beijing, Kim said North Korea most likely knew about his trip to China, hinting that there could have been an opportunity for Pyongyang and Washington to meet. While he expressed regret over this missed chance for serious dialogue, the U.S. envoy also mentioned that China wants North Korea back at the six-party negotiating table in order to rebuild trust with its ally. In the beginning of this year, the two Koreas seemed much more eager and willing to talk to each other, but things turned quite cold when North Korea virtually rejected South Korea's offer for talks, giving Seoul a set of preconditions instead. Our Connie Kim spoke to some of the experts to hear what they see in terms of inter-Korean talks in the coming months.
Since South Korea proposed high-level talks with the North late last month, the two Koreas have been unable to narrow their differences over a set of preconditions laid out by Pyongyang. Experts say that while the momentum for dialogue appears to have been lost, they're optimistic that talks could eventually resume, given policy goals in Seoul and Pyongyang. On the South Korean side, President Park Geun-hye wants to see progress in her trust-building process as she enters her third year in office. And North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, in his fourth year in power, wants to ease the economic hardship in the country by ending its diplomatic isolation. Experts also say, however, that both sides may have to wait until after a round of military drills between Korea and the U.S., scheduled for March, a halt to which was on Pyongyang's set of preconditions.
I would not expect any serious talks during the drills. Indeed, once it begins, everything will be frozen for a while. If nothing is heard until the beginning of these exercises, it means that the situation is likely to remain frozen. But, well, maybe even in this case there will be more contacts after the exercises end.
Others suggest the talks could occur even before the drills.
The North will ramp up pressure on the South until mid-February, but could then propose inter-Korean military talks to seek the scaling down of the drills or other political gains.
Pyongyang has long used inter-Korean talks when it wants to break out of its diplomatic isolation. Underlining its efforts to mend ties with the outside world, Kim Jong-un has reportedly accepted Russia's invitation to visit Moscow in May for an anniversary of its victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. There is also speculation Kim might head to Indonesia to attend the Bandung Conference of non-aligned Asian and African countries in April. Kim's grandfather and the regime's founder, Kim Il-sung, attended this event back in 1965, and the younger Kim has a track record of modeling himself after his grandfather. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Turning now to a new low for the president's approval ratings. Gallup Korea says just 29% of roughly 1,000 Koreans gave President Park Geun-hye good marks on how she's running the country. That's down by a percentage point from a week earlier. It's the first time President Park's approval ratings have dropped into the 20% range since she took office nearly 2 years ago. 63% of respondents said they were not satisfied with the president. The most cited reasons included lack of communication, the controversial tax policy revisions, and the president's failed personnel picks. The Australian Embassy here in Seoul celebrated the country's biggest holiday, Australia Day, with a special event filled with food and culture. Our Connie Lee takes us to a little bit of life down under right here in the capital.
Fresh, plump cherries, mangoes as large as your face, and deep red wine. These are just a few of the things that are here in Korea, straight from Australia. Celebrating Australia Day under the theme of Showcasing Australia, the nation's embassy in Seoul held a gala event to highlight all the things the nation has to offer to Korea as a key trade and investment partner. With the Korea-Australia Free Trade Agreement in full effect since December 2014, there are certain items from the land down under that are now cheaper here in Seoul. For instance, these cherries. The removal of the 24% tariff has made these fruits much more affordable to Korean consumers. Likewise for Australian wine.
I'm a lover of wine. It's a personal interest of mine. So I think with the tariff on wine coming down with the free trade agreement, I hope to see more range of choice of Australian wine in the market.
The Australian ambassador adds that he wants to stimulate new areas of trade this year and maintain his country's strong defense relationship with Korea.
We put a big emphasis on our defence relationship. Australia is very much an Asia-Pacific country, so peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula is central to our economic health.
The event also included a special performance by Korean-Australian pop singer Tommy Im, the 2013 winner of the singing show X Factor Australia.
I do want to come back to Korea this year, and if I get the opportunity, I want to do my own concert and, actually get to meet my fans and spend a bit more time here.
Connie Lee, Arirang News.
A deadly attack by Islamic State militants hit Egypt with a series of bombings targeting a military base in the northern part of the country.
For more, we turn to Paul Yee at the News Center. Paul, give us the details on this attack.
Well, first off, the death toll keeps rising. At least 30 people, mostly soldiers, were killed in what has been described as a previously unseen level of coordination by these militants. Egyptian officials say this violent siege took place in the town of Al-Arish in the North Sinai Peninsula on Thursday local time. Militants detonated a car bomb and fired mortar rounds at a hotel, a police club, and several security checkpoints. The Islamic State's Egypt branch later claimed responsibility for the attack. And shifting to the Islamic State hostage crisis, the Thursday deadline imposed by the militants has come and gone with no prisoner swap and no word from the jihadist group. The Turkish border gate, where the swap was to take place, remained calm on this Friday morning, as it's still unclear what's happened to either the Japanese hostage or the young Jordanian pilot Muath El-Kasebe. Meanwhile, people on the streets of Tokyo have cast doubt on the situation, with many losing hope for their fellow countrymen.
I'm still not sure whether the swap between the hostage and the death row convict is justifiable. It means we're putting back the criminal in our society. I don't know if such a thing can be justified under the plea of saving a human life.
I fully feel for the wife who said she wants her husband back immediately. I hope that her wish will be realized soon.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe says his government is working closely with Jordan and other countries to secure the release of Kenji Goto, who was captured in Syria last year. Addressing a parliamentary panel on Friday, Abe said every effort was being made to determine the fate of the Japanese journalist. And taking a look at the global economy, consumer prices in the Eurozone have fallen by a record 0.6% in January compared to a year earlier, raising fears of rapid deflation across Europe. Data from Eurostat released on Wednesday shows signs of accelerating deflation from a month ago. The agency said plunging oil prices around the world were largely to blame for the drop amid weak economic growth and high employment. The assessment backs the European Central Bank's decision last week to inject 1 trillion euros into the 19-nation bloc in a bid to drive up consumer prices. And finally, a report by Malaysia's state news agency claims that local insurance firms there have paid over $6 million to the families of the victims of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370. Signing a statement by the Life Insurance Association of Malaysia, Bernama said 14 life insurance companies had already settled claims on 185 policies since March last year. The news comes a day after Malaysian officials declared the disappearance of flight MH370 and the death of all 239 people on board as an accident. That conclusion was rejected by a group of 100 Chinese families of the ill-fated passengers on this Friday. And that wraps up our look at international stories for now. I'll see you back here next week.
Hello everyone, I'm Stephen Che with the Sports Brief. Starting with golf, South Korean Jang Ha-na shot to the lead at the Coats Golf Championship after putting up the best score of the field in round 2. How's that for the rookie? The 22-year-old was solid with 8 birdies and a single bogey, taking her score after 36 holes to 12 under par, good for a 4-shot lead over American Stacey Lewis. Although technically an LPGA rookie, her dominant start wasn't unexpected. The world's 21st ranked pro has experience and skill, attested by her 6 wins in 5 KLPGA seasons. And with the lead, Chang has a great shot at her first LPGA title, especially if she can pull out similar performances in the next 2 rounds. Off to the Australian Open, South Korean teenager Hong Sung-chan has made it to the junior boys singles final and has a chance to make history. Hong defeated his Australian opponent in the semis and now faces top seed Roman Safiullin of Russia in the title match Saturday. A win there will make him Korea's first junior Grand Slam champion. Meanwhile, from the boys to the men's singles final, Novak Djokovic advanced to face Andy Murray for the major on Sunday. Moving on, South Korea and Australia are set to meet in the Asian Cup final Saturday. South Korea has a perfect record and clean sheets to match, but how will they cope against Australia, who will have the home crowd in the 84,000-seat Sydney Stadium? SJ Lee has the preview.
5 matches, 5 wins, and not a single goal conceded. Expectations weren't high at the start, but now the South Korean national football team is on the brink of winning its first Asian Cup title in 55 years. But with Australia playing in front of their home crowd, it won't be an easy task, as the Socceroos are looking to win their first ever Asian Cup title. It's a battle between the tournament's best defensive team in Korea, who have yet to give up a single goal, and an Australian team that have scored the most goals with 12, with 10 different players finding the back of the net. And while the Taeguk Warriors beat the Socceroos 1-0 in their opening group stage match, most analysts expect the home team will push forward aggressively and try to break through the South Korean defense early on. The final carries extra weight as the winner also qualifies for the 2017 Confederation Cup in Russia. The Asian Cup final between South Korea and Australia kicks off in Sydney on Saturday at 6 p.m. Korea time. SJ Lee, Arirang News.
And on to Friday's KBL doubleheader. Let's go first to the tip-off over in Jeonju. Now, the KCC Aegis hosted the Dongbu Promi. The home team neutralized the fast start by the Promi by halftime. But David Simon and Kim Ju-sung take over late in the game, leading the Promi to their 3rd straight win. And over in Ulsan, the visiting Anyang KGC rushed to the early lead against the Mobis Phoebus, who can barely keep up. Leon Williams puts it away in the 4th quarter as KGC takes the victory. And that wraps it up for sports this week. Your weather's up next. Have a good night.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather forecast. We wrapped up the last working day of the week under mostly clear skies nationwide, but strong cold winds are making it feel slightly colder than the actual numbers. Make sure to bundle up on your ways out tomorrow because temperatures are about to take a dip. We will start off the Saturday morning at -7 and daytime highs will only rise to 1. Other than that, bright clear skies will greet most regions, but about a centimeter of snow may fall over Gyeongsang-Bukdo province in the afternoon. A cold wave watch has been issued for Gangwon-do province. This, along with wind chills from the north, could make conditions feel colder. Looking ahead, after tomorrow's cold snap, moderate winter weather awaits us next week. On to Saturday's readings. The daytime high here in Seoul hits 1, Gwangju hits 3, Busan reaches 6. Meanwhile, Jeju reaches a high of 5, Dokdo 1, Mount Kumgang -9. Those are the updates I have for you now. Hope you have a wonderful Friday evening and more updates coming up after midnight.
And that's primetime news for this Friday. I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for watching.
And I'm Kang Cheri. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll see you again soon.